The year is 2010. It's been a monumental year for gaming. Over the past 12 months, I've been spoiled by a whirlwind of legendary games. Red Dead Redemption, Mass Effect 2, and while my Xbox 360 is in the mail, tossing and turning in its cardboard coffin with a red ring of death, I'm starting to realize the joys of PC gaming, a la StarCraft 2 and TF2. While it was not a great year for my hair or my face, it was a truly phenomenal time for gaming. And there was no game I played more than Halo 3, released 3 years prior in 2007. The game was a masterpiece as far as I was concerned. Bungie had taken all of their ability, experience, and love and poured it into this magnum opus. I played it so much that I became the 7th person in the world to complete the campaign on Legendary with every skull enabled. An achievement that Bungie would personally recognize me for by bequeathing me recon armor, a high honor. It touched my greasy teenage heart to receive this award from the company I so idolized. It was a great time for gaming, and it was about to get even better. I'd been waiting patiently 3 long years for my favorite game developer to release their 4th and final Halo game, Halo Reach. I am so hyped for this game. I make one of my first ever YouTube videos, this cringeworthy Reach Double Rainbow parody video.
Double rainbow all the way across the sky. Yeah, yeah, so intense. Double rainbow all the way across the sky. Wow, wow, oh my God, look at that rainbow.
Little do I know, I'm about to play the most disappointing game I will ever play.
Much later.
It's now 2020, and a day has come I thought I'd never see. The day Halo comes to PC. It takes me totally by surprise, and I'm eager to replay the games I'd spent so many hours in as a youth. Halos 1, 2, and 3. I buy the Master Chief Collection right away without a second thought, and fire it up, only to be greeted by my old nemesis, Halo Reach. I was confused, angry, and once again disappointed to be thrust back into my least favorite Halo game. But the main menu is just so nostalgic. Monks chant their timeless hymns as Master Chief's big metal diaper floats gracefully across the screen. It's just like I remember, and it's enough to wrangle me in. I play a few rounds of my go-to game mode, Big Team Battle, and surprisingly, it's fun.
Hey, it's the Rocket Guy again. Hello, Mr. Rocket Guy! Oh! Whoa! No! Oh!
The game is still Halo, and still manages to hit that sweet nostalgia G-spot deep in the pooper. I play more, and it feels damn good to be playing Halo again, especially on PC. But the more I play, the more I notice all the little things that turned me off to the game 10 years ago, and still turn me off now. What follows is a detailed analysis of exactly what Reach did that made me and other Halo fans so inconsolably salty.
What is that?
I am a monument to all your sins.
We'll start with the biggest change to the game, armor abilities. There's a whole lot to say about these abilities because each of them changes the game so drastically, but I'll try to keep my rant as brief as possible. Starting with Sprint. Now, it is debatable whether or not Sprint belongs in Halo at all. I personally don't think it does, but I know most people like it, and that's okay. It's also debatable whether or not Sprint was added to the game for the purpose of competing with other big games of the time, like Call of Duty. I get that Sprint kinda had to be added to the game at some point, but why half-ass it by making it an armor ability? Why not full-ass it and just make it available to players at all times? I think the ugly truth is that they got married to this idea of the new loadout system, and then tried to come up with abilities like Sprint that would fit into that system. This is an ass-backward approach to game design, and it is pervasive in Reach. Next up, we'll take a look at what is undoubtedly the most controversial of the armor abilities, Armor Lock. Personally, I don't have too much of a problem with Armor Lock, but that's really only because people don't seem to use it too much anymore. Armor Lock can be used skillfully, and it's decently balanced, but it feels gimmicky and cheap, which explains its almost sacrilegious reputation amongst Halo fans. Moving on to Jetpack. Surprisingly, I think Jetpack works really well in Halo. It's just as fun to leap up the face of a building with ease and grace, as it is to be on the other team shooting helpless noobs out of the sky when they use the ability stupidly. It helps make high ground-centric maps like Boneyard and Breakpoint more traversable, and perhaps most importantly, it's fun. For these reasons, it is one of the only examples of Reach mixing up the classic Halo formula in a way that actually flows naturally with its core gameplay. If Jetpack is the best armor ability from a game design perspective, then active camo is truly the worst. Camo used to be a lot of fun in the older games. There was only one camo power-up per map, and if you were lucky enough to snag it, you were encouraged to run rampant and get as many sneaky kills as possible before it wore off. Camo was even fun to play against. It made you feel like a 1000 IQ badass when you were able to properly use your radar to detect the camo user and land your shots to counter it. But what they've done to camo in Reach is an abomination. It is the clearest example I have to demonstrate Bungie's ass-backward design process for the game. Camo was never meant to be used by multiple players at once. But since they had their hearts set on copying Call of Duty's shiny new loadout system, they just nerfed camo until it worked within that system. First, they changed camo so that if the player is running at normal speed with camo enabled, they are no longer fully invisible. To remain fully invisible, the player has to crouch walk or sit completely still. This blatantly encourages camping, and it seems Bungie realized this mistake, and then added the radar jammer effect in an attempt to correct that mistake. Combining this radar jammer effect with camo removes the element of surprise, which is the whole point of camo. Also, it still falls short of solving the core issue of camping. It seems Bungie also realized this mistake and then attempted to slap yet another band-aid atop of this gaping wound by taking away the camo user's audio so that they could not simply sit in one spot and listen for approaching enemies. At this point, camo is so far from its original glory that it's just not fun anymore. Bungie took something that worked really, really well for a long time and ruined it by shamelessly watering it down so they could shoehorn it into the new loadout system. Last, and definitely least, we have Hologram, which is really not even worth going into detail about. Let's just say that it's a great armor ability for ugly players who spend their time in cold dark places like caves or under bridges or in the comments section. Bungie talked about armor abilities like they were this cool new system that would allow them to bring innovation to Halo, and I understand that sentiment. It's true that each new game in any given series should evolve somewhat from the last. But Bungie had accomplished this before, and much more gracefully. In Halo 2, the biggest change to the core gameplay was probably dual wielding. Some people liked it, some people didn't like it. Most were indifferent. It wasn't a big enough change to cause a stink, but it was enough to take a little bit of a risk and move the series forward. In Halo 3, they decided to mix things up in an even bigger way with equipment. These were things like Bubble Shield, Power Drain, and portable grav lifts. They were powerful and unique new additions to the gameplay, but used sparingly enough that they weren't overbearing. Halo 3's equipment was also pleasantly neutral in its effects. Anyone could enjoy the gentle embrace of a bubble shield, or scale a wall with a portable grav lift left by another player. Unlike Reach, where every player always has access to these kinds of abilities, but the benefit only goes to the player using that ability. With Halo 3's equipment system, Bungie again took a bit of a risk in order to keep the series fresh and move it forward, but they did it without drastically affecting the core gameplay. Then we get to Reach, and they said screw all that incremental, carefully thought out improvement, let's just give every player superpowers. The end result was just a bunch of gimmicky tack-on magic tricks that subtly made the game worse in a thinly veiled attempt to compete with Call of Duty. Moving on, let's talk about the DMR and Bungie's decision to replace the beloved battle rifle with this borderline auto sniper. Aside from the controversial addition of reticle bloom, the key difference between the BR and the DMR is the range. Replacing a short to mid-range rifle with a mid to long-range rifle majorly affects the game. It allows players to hit each other at greater distances much more easily. This is an absolute nightmare on maps like Boneyard, where there is a vast open play area, but when everyone has a DMR, that play area just turns into no man's land. And it's not just Boneyard. It's any of the common Reach maps that seem to be designed for more mid-range combat. Take Tempest for example, a decent map, but when everyone spawns with a DMR, it means players are literally hitting each other across the map at all times. It's obnoxious. It also makes the DMR feel overpowered, though in games with assault rifle starts, it feels just fine, because there's not too many DMRs in play at any given time. In the original Reach 10 years ago, AR starts wasn't a thing, and it wasn't in the PC version until recently. It's really great that 343 is making an effort to correct some of the flaws with the original game, but it's still not perfect. If you elect to use AR starts, it's gonna have to be across all game modes, which means you'll have a pretty big chance of getting stuck in a dogshit tier objective game mode like Territories. But oh baby, when you do get a good old-fashioned AR starts game of Slayer or Two Flag, it feels so good. The pistol fills the short to mid-range gap left by the battle rifle, and the game flows much better. It feels a lot more like classic Halo when you don't have to worry about constant DMR harassment from across the map. It's a great first step, and I hope 343 follows through on this move by making AR starts standard, or at least allowing us to choose which game types we play with AR starts enabled. Just please don't make us play any more Territories 343. Seriously, just please stop that.
Game over.
Maps. Up until Reach, Bungie had a killer track record for filling their games with really solid maps, and the ones that weren't crowd pleasers were easily vetoed away. Now, Reach's maps are not bad per se, but they're a far cry from the level of excellence that previous Halos have always achieved. Most of them strike me as being pretty so-so, but then there's a few which actually are pretty bad. Boneyard stands out as the worst of the bunch. Literally only half the map is in use, yet they left the other half of the map still completely accessible. That's just lazy.
We're gonna get
in
a
there.
new hog.
Alright.
Where's the sniper?
Classic.
The classic switcheroo.
The old cookaroo. What's this guy doing here?
He's chasing us down like an idiot.
I know maps like Boneyard and Spire were designed for the flop of a game mode Invasion, but to leave them unedited and just throw them into big team battle is pretty lame. This wouldn't be so bad if we still had the power of the veto, but Reach removed the universally loved feature with no explanation, leaving us no choice but to play their shitty maps and game types. Weirdly, I think Reach's best multiplayer maps are actually Forge creations like Brick and Wayant. And that actually kind of makes sense, because you know those maps were 100% designed for multiplayer. This is at odds with maps like Boardwalk or Spire that feel great in campaign, but just slightly off for multiplayer. Vehicles. In general, I'd say vehicles are very well done in Reach. The Banshee is ultra light but crazy fast and packs a hell of a punch. The Falcons are a joy to fly once you get used to them. Ghosts are now trash cans, which is a bit sad, but they still make for good transport sometimes. Tanks are still tanks, and most importantly, the Warthog is nice and beefy. They even threw in a Rocket Hog on a few maps, which is absolutely redonkulous.
Kevin, 13 kills, Kevin. That thing is busted. Oh my god. It actually shoots missiles.
Yes, it shoots like 6 at a time, too.
I thought it was like...
Nice! Nice! Dude, we are running riot.
There's a 15 spree right there, baby.
Most of the time when I'm playing Halo, I'm playing Big Team Battle, and if it's a viable map, I'm driving the Warthog. Because this is the role I like to play, I admit that it greatly affects my view of the game. So, you might well take all of my points thus far as the ramblings of a lunatic virtual Uber driver, but for me, there's no better feeling than dominating the other team with some smart driving and a quality gunner. It's the perfect blend of man and machine, and luckily, it's remained largely untouched since Halo CE. Vehicles are this game's saving grace for me, and if they weren't so damn fun, I wouldn't play this game, at all. But as with most aspects of Halo Reach, it's just a slight step down from where it used to be. The vehicles themselves are wonderful, but the ways those vehicles are counterbalanced are less interesting. The DMR is a big problem here again. With mouse and keyboard, it's powerful enough and accurate enough to snipe down most vehicles on its own. Aside from that, Reach maps mostly tend to go heavy on the plasma launchers and other big boopers. Replacing some of these boring point-and-click launchers with the new EMP grenade launcher would be a good start. Halo 3 did a good job of counterbalancing vehicles in interesting ways. Rest in peace, Brute Chopper. Our lovely giant wheel of death was the anti-vehicle vehicle, and it was one of the most fun Halo vehicles ever.
Firefight.
Gears of War 2 was released in 2008, and with it, wave defense became the flavor of the week. If you were a AAA game at the time, you simply had to have a wave defense mode if you wanted to hang with the cool kids. Halo hopped on this bandwagon with Firefight, and it turned out well. It's a fun mode, and it stood the test of time. 10 years from now, I doubt the current flavor of the week will hold up as well, Battle Royale. Comparing wave defense to Battle Royale makes me think though. It seems our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter as time goes on. I wonder what the next flavor of the week might be if the trend continues. Perhaps it will be something that manages to release the dopamine even faster. How about one-round 1v1s, where whoever wins gets bumped up the global leaderboard, then immediately thrown into another match with the next player up the ladder? I'd play that. Forge mode. Forge was a key feature that was in the game at launch 10 years ago, but hasn't made it into the PC edition for understandable reasons. It was, after all, a map-making tool designed specifically for consoles, so porting it to PC would basically require 343 to recreate the entire system for a mouse and keyboard. Hopefully they get around to it at some point, but for now, I'm just happy that the community has developed their own mapping tools to use in lieu of an in-game Forge mode. Custom games are shaping up to be more glorious than ever, with many of the old classics already being recreated for Reach. We've also got mods like Extinction coming out that hint at a very promising future for modding this game. Of everything Halo on PC has to offer, I'd say custom game nights are actually what I'm looking forward to most. The last thing I need to talk about is going to be campaign. Reach's campaign was fun and well made, with great music as always, and downright gorgeous atmospherics. It offered some classic cool Halo moments, but left something to be desired in the story department. The narrative was laser focused on getting to know the squad of Spartans, and as a result, suffered from a lack of supporting characters. This is totally different from the epic space operas we're used to in Halo, which feature plenty of heroes and villains. Villains especially. There were no wheelchair-bound prophets to punch in the face, or ancient tentacle monsters for people to make Rule 34 with. No, the plot was just go here, blow up a ship, go there, blow up a bigger ship, go fetch some research data, run it to another ship, game over. And yes, I know the research data was Cortana, still boring. And this is a sci-fi universe. How hard is it to make a Cortana.zip and email it to chadkeys77@unsc.gov? Oh right, but then the part where we ride Brokeback with Emil through a field of scarabs to deliver a thumb drive wouldn't have made any sense. The most disappointing moment of the campaign was when Kat got doinked by a stray needle. It was like, really? Not even a sniper round or a grenade or any of the weapons in the game that are actually a one-shot kill? Literally every other Spartan goes out in a blaze of glory, getting stabbed 50 times or kamikazing for the greater good. But not Kat. The only female Spartan gets dunked on by a single jackal, and then her body is dramatically paraded around in a cliché effort to make us care. Good to know that all it takes to turn me into a raging feminist is a little shitty writing. It was for these reasons I only played through the game once when it first came out, then pretty much forgot about it. I've now replayed it again 10 years later, and I still think the same things. There were just a lot of missed opportunities to tell the stories of the people of Reach, and of the Covenant leaders that would destroy them. Whew! I think that's it. That's pretty much everything worth talking about. Now, with everything Reach is screwed up on, you might think that I hate the game, that I think it's a bad game and you should feel bad for playing it. I won't deny that. There is a part of me that feels like that. A pretty big part, actually. But when I take a step back, I see an objectively good game. A game that has all the same polish and love as the other Halos. A game that's graphics still hold up 10 years later. And a game that's fun at the very least. But the devil is in the details. There are just so many small, weird little design decisions that leave the game just slightly worse off than its predecessors. And all those small things add up to create an inescapable feeling of disappointment. A feeling that is as much to blame on Bungie and their falterings as it is on me and my fanatical expectations.
So intense.
This is why I say Reach is, and will always be, my most disappointing game of all time. Not because it was bad, but because my expectations were so set in stone. Looking back on it now, I can see Reach actually taught me some valuable lessons. To never let your expectations get so high that they suffocate you. To know that just because a game developer or a director or an artist has made amazing works in the past doesn't mean that they won't fail or take risks in the future. After Bungie finished working on Halo and moved on to Destiny, I could have fanatically stuck with them, griping and groaning the whole time about how Bungie was so much better in the good old days of Halo, but I didn't. I knew that Bungie and I had had our time in the sun, and it was over now. Years later, the same attitude has served me well with Bethesda. Much like Bungie, they made absolutely stellar games for many years. But when they stopped doing that, I took it with a grain of salt. Instead of remaining fiercely loyal and forcing myself to play their games, I just said, well, that doesn't look like it's for me, and I went on to find something that was for me. It's a lesson that remains relevant today, and will for the rest of my life. Who knows, maybe CD Projekt Red will royally fuck up Cyberpunk. And if they do, no biggie. I'll commend them for trying something so ambitious, and I'll move on. Maybe Bethesda will totally redeem themselves with The Elder Scrolls 6, or Starfield. Or maybe they won't. Set your expectations low, and you will never be disappointed. Not exactly words to live by, but it's a sentiment that allows me to enjoy stuff without getting too judgy. It's hard to wrap my mind around just how much our expectations directly affect our experiences. It's the reason Valve can create a groundbreaking new game like Half-Life Alyx and still leave us feeling a bit disappointed. It's also the reason Pacific Rim is one of my favorite movies. It's because I went in blind with zero expectations, so I was able to completely focus on what it did well and truly let the rest slide. So thank you, Bungie. Thank you for showing me precisely where the line should be drawn between letting things slide and noping the fuck out. And thank you, Reach, for being such a colossal disappointment that you've changed my view of the world to be a little more realistic, a little less fanatical, and a lot more forgiving. Also, 2 out of 5, bad game.